Well, good afternoon. It's about that time for us to get started. I want to welcome you all back to week two of Communicating with Care, and I'm glad that you all came back. Um, as we open every class, I want to take a moment and I want to just check in with each of you and find out how you're doing. And you feel free to tell me as much as you want, as little as you want. But just let me know how your week's been going. Thank you all for sharing. I appreciate your willingness to open up in this class and to share with us how things are going. And since you share with me, I feel it's only fair that I share a little with you. Um, I'll be honest, this week has been technologically very difficult. I ran into a lot of issues with preparing for class today, but we are here and I think everything is going to go um, about as smoothly as I can hope. Um, Before we get into today's lesson, what we want to do is I want to just take us back to last week. And I want you to tell me what you remember about what we talked about as far as why we should show students that we care. What's the point of any of this? Thank you. And those are great answers. So last week, what we talked about the students feel that people who have disabilities are looked down on. Y'all remember that? Talked about how there's a stigma that gets placed on disabilities, and that stigma creates a cycle in which emotional and academic well-being are hindered or completely cut off. We also talked about the fact that positive teacher-student interactions creates a sense of school belonging in their students. So students want to have an interaction with their teachers. They want positive interactions. And when they do that, they have this sense that they belong in that school setting. And that's what we want. But we also talked about the fact that teachers have to realize the social function they play in the lives of their students. It is not just an academic function that we serve. And, when we talk about teachers and students, we're not talking about just the traditional um, educational setting. Some of you may be in organizations, you may be leading there, you may be pastors or preachers, or um, you may be training. I don't know where all you come from and what all your backgrounds are, but whatever it is, in whatever form that you are leading, you are teaching people, they want to have an interaction with you, and you play an important role. And so that's what this course is really all about. Defining what our social function is for these students and what it is that we can provide for them outside of just academic knowledge. Because there is an element of teaching that falls outside of academic knowledge. And so what is the role of a teacher? Um, how many of you think that the teacher has absolutely no role in helping students deal with their emotional, mental, or physical disabilities? Some of you. That's fair. That's okay. And how many of you think that the teachers should only serve as a referring source? In other words, you find out that there's an issue with a student, and so you refer them to maybe the counseling center or whatever mental health resource that your institution has. Okay, and that's also fair. What I hope to get you to at least think about is expanding our role. We interact with these students more than sometimes their parents do, more than their friends. And if we're not creating a connection and, helping them, we're hindering them. And we'll talk about that throughout the course of this, or throughout the weeks of this course. But I want you to start thinking about how you see your role. And our readings this week really kind of defined how teachers see their role, right? We read White and LaBelle, and what White and LaBelle said was that they, in their interviews with teachers, these are the things that they found um, that teachers thought their role was. The empathetic, the emp- I can't say the word, the empathic teacher, the empathic listener. Who remembers what White and LaBelle had to say about the empathic listener and what that was? Yeah. So the empathic listener is somebody who is willing to listen, who wants to communicate with these teacher or with these students. Um, and there was a quote right at the end of that section of the article, and it said, "It's not about being a teacher. It's not about being a friend. It's about being a human being. It's about interacting with people, right? It's about giving a part of ourselves in order to help another individual. And that's what teaching is. Whether I help them with a mental or emotional or a physical disability or not, part of teaching is automatically giving of myself in order to help another person. And all I'm asking you to do is open up your mind to this concept of adding this little aspect of being willing to help them through these disabilities, through these hindrances, to help them fulfill their best potential self in the short time that you have with them. We may have 16 weeks. You may get students come to you repeatedly, right? In a college course, you may have them sign up for your courses over and over and over. Or you may get one shot. Make it worth it. Sit down with them, talk to them, listen to them, and understand who they are. That's what the empathic listener does. What else did White and LaBelle talk about? The referral source. Yes, we just talked about that, right? That's somebody who you find out that there may be an issue and you refer them to a mental health resources. And that is not a wrong approach. If somebody has severe issues, yes, we need to be referring them to the proper institutional resources that are available to them, because that's where people are trained to deal with them. But I want us to understand that that doesn't mean that there isn't a role for teachers to play. I can be an empathic listener and I can also be a referral source. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. I can do both of these. I can actually do all of these things that the White and LaBelle talk about without ever forfeiting one of the other roles. So what's another role that White and LaBelle mentioned? Yep, first responder. So the first responder, what do? They alert the administration, right? So this is the person who finds out that something is going on with the student and they let the administration know. Now, there can be different reasons for that. To put the administration on alert, to be aware, right? And that's fair, especially in the age of school shootings and all that. The administration should be aware that there's an issue that could potentially get out of hand. They could also be alerting the administration so that so that the administration can help that student find the resources that they need. So those are all true. There's also the role of being a bystander. Who remembers what that role was? Yeah. Being a bystander is being afraid of being misinterpreted or that your advice is going to be taken the wrong way or that you're going to cross a line. Okay. This role is based out of fear. And I'm going to tell you that I believe that this is the only role that teachers should not play. That is an opinion. You do not have to agree with me on that. But let me tell you why. Being afraid of a student misinterpreting what you're saying and therefore not communicating at this level with any of your students is harmful to all of your students. If they're not seeking help elsewhere and they come to you and they mention it to you and all you do is refer them off, they don't go get help, and the problem only festers. You're hurting your student. It is okay to be cautious in how you talk to them, to be cognizant of the rules that your institution places on instructors, but to not engage with them, in my opinion, is detrimental to them both emotionally, physically, and academically. And those are the aspects of their life that we are here to help touch and affect. So this is what teachers believe their role is. What were the techniques that White and LaBelle found teachers thought that they could use to kind of help address some of these issues? Yes, of course. Teachers repeatedly said that they could use their syllabus as a way to put resources out there, to get phone numbers. And I agree with that. You noticed last week when we went through the syllabus for this course, we talked about the resources that are available to you. So yes, absolutely. Use your syllabus. Create a syllabus that is accessible and that communicates what resources each student has available to them. What else? Encouraging open communication and conversation. I think this is probably one of the most important, and it's the hardest maybe. How do I communicate with a student and let them know that they can be open with me and that they can come and they can talk to me? Each person does it differently. I have ways that I try to communicate with people. You'll discover yours, and I'm not going to, throughout the course of this semester, we're going to talk about techniques that you might be able to use. We'll talk about being able to identify the issues that somebody may have and how to try to overcome those and reach that student. And in the last half of the course, we'll talk about specific techniques on how to set up your classroom and your curriculum in order to make it accessible to anybody. What else? The other thing that White and LaBelle mentioned was utilizing class reminders or check-ins. Who remembers what they were talking about check-ins? So what White and LaBelle were talking about was they were talking about exactly what we did at the beginning of this class. Checking in with your students. How are you doing? How's your week been? Now, the one thing that the White and LaBelle article says is that these teachers were using it, especially at finals. And that's great. Finals is a stressful time, and finals is a time when students are conducive to getting overwhelmed and where issues may bubble up to the surface. I don't think you should wait until finals. You will find that we will do it, if not every week. We will check in with each other almost every week at least. Because I want you to know that I'm here, that I'm listening, and that I care. And that's what that is designed to express to you, right? I want you to know, and I want your students to know that they are free to say whatever they want in the class. That they are in a safe environment, and that we are here to teach them and help them develop and become the best potential person that they possibly can be. You know? And so every week I want to find out where you are. that also helps create a um, kind of a baseline, right? Because we can start to see like where things are starting to shift. Is there an emotional change? Was this person really happy and talkative at the beginning of the semester, and in the middle of it, suddenly they're barely sharing, they don't want to talk, and when they do, they're telling us how terrible things are going for them? Those are the things we want to know. Those are the changes in progress that we want to see. That's why we want to check in often. Um, this part comes from Lambert and Lambert. I hope y'all read that one. I thought that one was pretty interesting because they give some specific techniques, especially about dealing with people who have experienced trauma, and we'll talk about trauma in a couple of weeks. But their main suggestion is know the educational and privacy policy of the institution. Every institution, every school in the entire country is regulated by FERPA, right? So are we. We always will be. Um, and so you need to know that law. But you also need to know what your institution, whatever school you go to, wherever you're teaching, whether it's an organization or a university or a high school or an elementary school, what are privacy policies? What does your institution want you to be following? Make sure you stay within those guidelines. Um, and then know the signs of student distress. We're going to touch on them briefly this week here in just a minute. But starting next week, we're going to start talking about students with physical disabilities. We'll talk about that for 2 weeks. We're going to talk about what the disabilities are, and then the following week, we will talk about how we overcome the barriers that those disabilities can put on students. The week after that, we will talk about emotional, right, disabilities, and then the week after that, we're going to talk about mental. All right, or 2 weeks after that, we're going to talk about mental, and each week we're going to talk about the barriers that these students face and how we can possibly overcome them. That is where we are going to learn how to implement and see the warning signs. And techniques that we can use to help us overcome those. Now, in the last half of the course, like I mentioned a second ago, we're going to talk about actually forming a emotionally connected classroom. That's the name of your book, and that's what we're hoping to get out of it. But we need to know the science first, and so we're going to get there. That brings us to DARE, right? The emotionally connected classroom. And he says that the signs of distress can be intense emotions, panic, destructive, uncontrollable behavior. Those are the things we think of, right? When you think of somebody in distress, what do you think of? Yeah, those are the things. We think of somebody who is one step away from walking through the door and exploding. But Adair wants us to understand that they can also be a lot less obvious. That when students are in survival mode, sometimes it's really small things that we have to be willing and able to notice. And so I threw this in here. This is directly from your book. We won't go through all of them, but let's take a look at a few of them. A good student always does his work, but rarely interacts with others. Right? An ADHD problem student bounces in his seat with no avenue to expel his nervous energy. His face is flushed and his body twitches. These are signs of anxiety. These are signs of trouble within the student. A girl freezes during a speech. She looks pale and stiff. At this point, I want to stop, and I want to address an issue that I think sometimes we forget about. Some people have speaking anxiety, right? Communication anxiety. And I wouldn't necessarily say that somebody who gets nervous during a speech is suffering some type of anxiety or emotional or physical disability. What I would say is that that person, even if it's just communication anxiety, still needs a teacher to reach out and communicate with them and help them through it. There's research that suggests that teachers look at students who don't communicate a lot in class, who don't talk a lot in class, that they are somehow disengaged, or they don't care, or that maybe they're not interested in the class. I want to challenge that research. Not in that I don't think that it's accurate. I want to challenge that in that I don't want teachers to leave this classroom and look at any one of their students and think that that person just doesn't care, or that person just doesn't like this class and there's nothing you can do. I want you to reframe the way you see students. I want you to see them in a way in which you care about them, and instead of automatically labeling them as disengaged, uncaring, lazy, not smart enough, instead of labeling them like that, let's find out if something is wrong and let's help them work through that. That is how we're going to better our students. That's how we're going to help impart the academic knowledge, because when we show them that we care and when we help them work through these issues, we can then start building on the academic knowledge, which is what we're here to do. So Adair uses the hunter-gatherer philosophy to kind of help us understand where he's going to be going in this book. What was he trying to say? So his analogy is that hunters and gatherers depended on each other for survival. And that as the world has evolved at this rapid pace, the consequence of that is disconnection, right? We communicate now through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I hardly ever have to see or talk to another person, and I don't have to depend on them for anything. But that's not the way we were physiologically developed to be. We are meant to be connected. And this disconnection that we have found ourselves in has led to an, as Adair calls it, a mental health epidemic. And until we reconnect each other, or reconnect with each other, we cannot get out of it. And so what he is saying is that by creating an emotionally connected classroom, we can help restore the balance, and we can help these students find a way to engage, to overcome the struggles that they may be facing, and to learn. And that is what we're aiming for. Now, that brings us to the end of our readings this week. What I hope that you are taking from this class is that we're a helping profession. Sometimes we may not think of ourselves like as teachers or trainers or whoever. We may not think of ourselves as a helping profession, but we are. We are here to help others. And the only way that we are successful at that is if we help them through whatever issues they're facing. We may not have a lot of time. We may not be the best qualified. But being an ear and listening and being prepared to handle those type of situations is vital. And I hope that you are willing that throughout the rest of this semester to at least entertain these ideas. Think about what we're saying. And if you walk out of here at the end of the semester and all that you think you've gotten out of it is that you would be able to identify the needs of the signs of a student in distress and be able to refer them to the proper resource, then I'm okay with that. But I hope that you're willing to think about these things and try to shape your classroom, whatever form that classroom takes, into something that is emotionally connected where you can best reach out and help these students. Appreciate y'all's time this week. And if y'all have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Other than that, I'll see y'all next week.